chains were iron, and they had been forged. Neve walked into the throne room of the Iron King, wearing them like a second spine. Her wrists were bloodied, where the cuffs had bitten through the linen wrapping she had stolen on the road. Her ankles were wounds. The chain between her feet was just short enough to make her stumble, and just long enough to let her recover. Whoever had measured it had known exactly what they were doing. She did not stumble. She walked the length of that hall under the eyes of 300 wolves, past the carved oak pillars, past the open fire, where pine logs cracked like distant gunshots, and she did not let her gaze drop. She was 24 years old. She had buried her mother at 16 and her father at 20. She had crossed 2 territories on foot, with her ankles bleeding and a name folded inside her shift like a knife. She would not break in front of a court that had been waiting 6 hours to watch her break. At the far end of the hall, on a throne of black iron and antler bone, the king watched her come. He did not move. He did not speak. His beater, a tall, weathered wolf with a scar through one eyebrow and the bearing of a man who had killed in 3 wars, leaned down and murmured something to him. The king's jaw tightened. Something behind his eyes went very, very still. Neve stopped 6 paces from the throne. The protocol, she had been taught it once by a woman who was no longer alive, was 12 paces. The guards at her flanks stepped forward to correct her. The king raised one hand. The guards stopped. Closer, the king said. His voice was lower than she had expected, and rougher, like a blade drawn across stone. Not cold. The man on that throne was not cold. There was something worse. Patient. She walked the 6 remaining paces in her chains. When she stopped, she was close enough to count the silver threading at his collar. Close enough to see that his left hand, resting on the iron arm of the throne, was bare of any ring. "Lift your face," he said. She had already lifted it. She did not lift it further. She let him see that. Something at the corner of his mouth shifted. Not quite a smile, not even close. But for the first time in a long while, the Iron King had looked at someone who refused to perform fear. And his wolf, silent for so long the court had stopped flinching when his eyes shifted, had risen to its feet inside his chest. "Who sent her?" he asked them all. The beta answered, "Lord Brennan of the Hollow Reach, my king. Tribute by the terms of the treaty signed last winter." "Tribute," the king repeated. The word fell into the hall and stayed there. Neve's hands, held together by the iron at her wrists, were perfectly still. 3 hours later, 2 of his generals would be kneeling at her feet. 6 hours later, one of them would be dead. By dawn, the oldest curse in the kingdom would have a name spoken aloud for the first time in 20 years. But that was not yet. Now, in the great hall of Torvald of the Iron Reach, the king leaned forward by a single degree and said, "Take off her chains." The beta, Tideman, did not move. "My king," he said, careful, "she has not been processed." "Take them off." Silence. "Tideman." The beta moved. The cuffs at her wrists came off first, then the iron at her ankles. The chains fell to the stone with a sound that carried to the back of the hall, and 300 wolves heard it and understood that something had changed in their kingdom that they did not yet have the words for. Neve did not rub her wrists. She did not look at the blood. She looked at the man on the iron throne, and she let him see her see him. The gauntness of his cheekbones, the shadow under his eyes that no amount of sleep would lift, the way his right hand had moved once, just once, toward the empty place on his left where a wedding ring should be. She knew that gesture. She had seen it before, in another hall, in another country, 20 years ago, when she had been 4 years old, and her mother had been carrying her on her hip through the corridors of this very fortress on the night the Iron King's luminary. Her mother had been the healer. Neve remembered the door. She remembered who had been standing outside it. And she had come all this way, across 2 territories, and the winter, and her own buried family, to put a name in this king's hand. She did not yet know that the man whose name she carried was sitting 20 paces to the king's left, watching her with the expression of a man who had just recognized a ghost. His name was General Asmund. He smiled at her, slow and warm, like an uncle welcoming a niece home. Neve smiled back. It was the first lie she told in the Iron King's hall, and it would not be the last. The throne room emptied in stages. The courtiers first, then the lesser lords, then the warriors not on guard duty. Torvald did not move from the throne. He watched her stand in the center of his hall, unchanged now, but not yet anything else, and he tried to understand why his wolf, which had not stirred for any woman in 2 decades, was holding its breath. "Guide me," he said. "My king." Quarters in the east wing. Healer. Food. A door that locks from the inside. The Beta hesitated. "She is unhoused, my king. The east wing is..." "The east wing." "Yes, my king." "And, Kaiba." "Yes." "Whoever measured those chains, I want their name on my desk by morning." The Beta bowed and withdrew. Lady Vesna had been waiting at the side of the hall through all of it. She stepped forward now, silk the color of dried blood, hair coiled into a crown that mocked the absence of an actual one, the daughter of one of the 3 oldest noble houses of the Iron Reach. He had been at court for 11 years. She had been certain, for 9 of them, that she would be the one whose name was spoken in the coronation prayer. "My king," she said, gentle. "The unhoused girl. The east wing is reserved for..." "Lady Vesna." "My king." "You may not." Vesna's smile did not snap. It became, somehow, more graceful. "Of course, my king. I only meant..." "I know what you meant." The hall was almost empty now. Torvald stood. He was very tall, and the throne made him look taller. His cloak was black wool lined in dark color, and it moved around him like weather. He walked down the 3 steps of the desk. He stopped 3 paces from Neve. Not one. Not close enough to the court to whisper. "What is your name?" he asked her. "Neve," she said. "Neve of where?" "Of Norway, my king." He looked at her for a long moment. He said softly. She did not flinch. "You speak the high tongue of the rounded vowels of the North Shore. You hold your right hand a half-inch lower than your left, the way a healer's apprentice does when she has carried herbs in her sleeve since childhood. The chains were measured by someone who hated you specifically, and you knew the protocol for approaching a wolf king's throne, which means you are from somewhere. You are not telling me where." "No, my king. Because if I tell you where I am from, you will know what I have come to say. I do not yet know the secrecy in his heart." The first crack in his face, not a smile. "Something strange happened." "You are clever," he said. "I have had to be. Will it be safe to say it tomorrow?" She looked, just once, past his shoulder, at the man in the general's harness who had been watching her without seeming to. "I will know by tomorrow, my king." Torvald turned, slowly, and followed her glance. General Asmund inclined his head, a model of military deference, a man at home in his king's hall. When Torvald turned back to her, his expression had not changed by any measure she could have named, but his wolf, behind his eyes, had bared its teeth. "Tomorrow, then," he said. He walked past her toward the door at the rear of the hall. At the threshold, he stopped. "Neve, my king, whoever taught you that protocol?" They clung to me. A small silence. "Yes, my king." Good. He was gone. The healer who came to her quarters that night was old and silent, and laid out salves with hands that had done this work for 40 years. Neve let the woman wrap her wrists. She let the woman bring her a bowl of clean water and a bowl of broth. She did not eat the broth. She drank one mouthful of the water and held the rest in her cheek, and spat it carefully into the basin by the bed when the healer turned away. The water had been silvered, not enough to kill a wolf, just enough to make a half-blooded woman's daughter sick for 3 days, sick enough to be moved to a quieter room, sick enough that whatever happened to her in that quieter room would not be witnessed. She had eaten silver before. She had been taught to taste it at 6 years old, in case anyone ever came for her family the way they had come for her mother. She lay down on the bed in the east wing of the Iron King's fortress, with her hands curled around a small folded scrap of linen hidden in the seam of her shift, and she closed her eyes, and she made herself sleep. She had 3 hours. She did not know yet that she had 3 hours, but she had. And in this fortress, a name was enough. He did not sleep. He had not slept properly in 20 years. The curse, the iron vow, the courtiers called it now, when they thought they were not here, did not allow sleep on the nights after he had made a oath. And he had sworn one this evening without meaning to. He had told the chained woman in his hall that her quarters would be in the east wing. He had said it in the high tongue, in the formal voice. He had not realized, in the moment, that he was speaking to an oath. For 7 days now, she could not be moved to the east wing without his presence. For 7 days, his iron crown would feel a fraction heavier than it had this morning. He had not chosen this. He had not chosen anyone. 20 years ago, 21 in the spring, his Luna had died in the corridor outside her own chambers, with a silver dart in her throat and the king's seal ring missing from her hand. 20 years ago, his beater of that time had told him the killer was an unknown agent in the southern packs. 20 years ago, his court had pressed the iron crown on his head and bound him by oath, by ancient ritual, to swear no other woman as long as the murder went unavenged. He had agreed. He had been 23 years old, half mad with youth, and he had agreed. The curse had taken hold of him. Every oath he swore on the iron crown, every formal word in the high tongue, bound him for 7 days. The iron vow, they called it. A small thing. The king's small inconvenience. He had not understood for years why it grew heavier each season. He had not understood why his strength, which should have been at its peak by his 35th year, had begun to plateau and then to recede, like a tide that was not coming back. He had not understood why every challenger he killed had carried a small disc of black iron sewn into their belt, and why the beater of that time had told him these were reward tokens worn by superstitious foot soldiers and not worth examining. He had asked once. He had been told. He had been told for 20 years. Tonight, for the first time in 20 years, a woman had walked into his hall in chains and looked at him as if she knew the shape of the question he had stopped asking. Torvald sat at the table in his private chamber and turned his iron crown over in his hands. The metal was warm against his palms. It had not been warm in years. He set it down. He stood up. He walked to the east wing. She woke when the door opened because she had taught herself to wake when doors opened. Torvald stood in the doorway with no torch and no guard, and he said, "The water. It was silvered, my king. Tell me. She sat up. She did not pull the linen sheet around her, because she was wearing a shift she had walked in chained, and there was nothing in the architecture of how she sat that invited him to look at her. She looked at him. My king, if I name the person I suspect and I am wrong, you will lose an ally tonight. If I name them and I am right, you will lose an ally tonight. Either way you lose. I would ask you for 3 hours before I name anyone. 3 hours. Yes, ma'am. She reached into the seam of her shift and pulled out a folded scrap of linen she had carried for 9 years. She unfolded it on her knee. Inside was a small disc of black iron, no larger than a coin, with a single wound scratched on one face. Thorvald. He had seen that room 400 times in 20 years, on the belts of dead challengers, on the cloak pins of foreign envoys, on the hilts of swords. He had been told it was a war mark. The woman in the bed in the east wing of his fortress said, very quietly, "My mother died in this room. She was the healer the night your Luna died. She knew what these tokens were, but she told the wrong person, and she died for it. I have spent 9 years learning what they are. I have come to your hall to tell you." He sat down on the bench at the foot of her bed. He did not look at her. He looked at the iron disc on the linen on her knee. "Tell me what they are." "Every oath you have sworn on your crown for 20 years has fed a fraction of your strength into the iron tokens carried by the men who sealed your binding. Each oath a sliver, each man a token. Over 20 years, my king, you have armed a faction inside your own court without knowing it. There are men in this fortress tonight whose strength is not their own." His hands had gone very still on his knees. "How many? I do not know how many. I know one. Tell me." "In 3 hours, my king. I need 3 hours." "Why?" "Because if you confront him now, he will kill me before I prove it. And I have not come this far to be the second healer's daughter who dies in this corridor." Thorvald looked up at her then. Her face was very calm. His face was not. 3 hours, he said. He stood up. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. "Kneel." "What did your mother teach you about oaths?" "That a man who has been married by a false wife must give every breath of his life." "And what does she want me to do with mine?" "She has been dead for 20 years. What she wants is not the question." "What did you want?" "I want you to live long enough to know who took her from me." He left. She closed her eyes. She had 3 hours. Cadman, who was not the beater of 20 years ago, that beater was buried in the western crypts, dead of a sudden fever the same week the king had stopped sleeping. Cadman, who was the king's beater now, and had been for 9 years, was woken at the second watch by a hand on his shoulder. His king was standing up. "Up, my king. Bring me every iron token that has ever been recovered from a dead child in the last 20 years. They are in the lower archive, a drawer marked war cards. I want every one of them on the table in my private chamber before the door." Kindly dressed in silence. By the third watch, there were 131 iron discs on the king's table. Need, brought to the chamber by a guard who did not yet know what he was guarding, looked at them and went very, very still. 131, she said. "Yes. I need a piece of chalk." He had chalk before. She knelt by the table and began to saw them. The runes were small, and most of them were faint. There were patterns. There were houses. There were specific etchings made by specific blacksmiths in specific years. By the fourth watch, she had divided the 131 tokens into 7 piles. 6 of the piles were small. They were the noble houses she had expected, minor, opportunistic, dangerous, but not catastrophic. The 7th pile was 84 tokens. "My king," she said. He looked at the pile. "That is one man's mark," she said. 84 oaths. 20 years of restraint. One name. "Tell me the name." She told him the name. Torvald did not speak for a long time. Then he said, "Caden." The beater, who had been standing by the door, came forward. "Wake my generals, all of them, in the throne room, now. Tell them their king has had a dream." Caden went. Torvald looked down at Eve, who was still kneeling by the table with chalk on her fingers and the iron of his curse spread out in front of her on the mat. "You are not a tribute," she said. "No, my king. You came to me." "Yes. For 3 hours you have been the most dangerous person in this fortress, and I did not know it. You took my chains off." The throne room at the fourth watch was lit by torches and held 7 men. The 6 generals of the Iron Reach, in various states of dress, and General Asmund, who had arrived first and was standing closest to the throne. Torvald entered without ceremony. He carried no crown, he wore no cloak. He sat on the iron throne in his shirt sleeves and a half-melted tunic, and he said, "I have had a dream, gentlemen. I dreamt that one of you has been killing me for 20 years. The silence was so complete that the torches sounded loud. I am told, by a healer's daughter, that the iron tokens carried by my dead challengers have been bleeding my alpha strength for 2 decades. I am told that 84 of them carry one specific mark. I would like the man who carries that mark to identify himself, please." No one moved. Asmund, the general, did not move. "Step forward, my king." Asmund's voice was warm, avuncular. The voice of a man who had been at this court longer than the king had been on the throne. "If this is a test, I am proud to be..." "It is not a test." "Then I would ask, my king, on what evidence?" "Neve." She stepped into the doorway. The iron disc in her hand caught the torchlight. Behind her, Kaidman was holding a pile of 84 others on the floor of the cloak. Asmund's face did not change. His hand moved toward the dagger at his belt. It was Kaidman who broke his wrist. It was the Iron King's youngest general, a woman named Marin, who had served 12 years and never once been promoted past her current rank, who stepped forward and laid down her sword on the stone in front of the iron throne and said, "My king, I knew." She knelt. "I knew for 3 years. I did not know how to tell you. I am ready for whatever you decide." The second general, Garrett, the oldest of them, with white at his temples, knelt beside her. "I suspected for 9, my king. I beg your forgiveness." The other 3 generals did not kneel. They drew steel. He, in the doorway, did not move. It took less than a minute. When it was done, 3 generals were dead, 2 were kneeling, and General Asmund, disarmed, broken-wristed, white-faced, was being held against the floor by 2 of Kaidman's wolves with iron at his throat. Torvald looked at him for a long moment. "You will be tried publicly," he said. "Tomorrow, in this hall. The healer's daughter will speak. The tokens will be presented. The court will hear it all." "My king, Asmund said. His voice was thin.
You do not know what you are doing. The faction.
I will learn what I am doing. I am told I have 20 years of strength to recover. I have time. He stood. He walked to where Neve was standing in the doorway, and he did not touch her, and he did not speak. He looked at her. She looked back. 3 hours after she had walked into his throne room in chains, 2 of his generals were kneeling. Dead. The oldest curse in his kingdom had a name. And Lady Vesna, in her chambers on the western side of the fortress, was being woken by her maid with the news that something had gone very wrong in the throne room, and that she should consider whether her own iron token, sewn into the lining of her dressing table drawer, was perhaps best moved before morning. If you are listening tonight, your chest is tight, and you are realizing, like the Iron King realized, that you have been bled for years by someone who smiled at you across a table, take one slow breath. The story is only beginning. Tap the heart on this video so it finds the other listeners who need to hear what comes next. The trial of General Asmund did not happen the next day. It did not happen because, 2 hours before dawn, the deeper truth of the iron tokens broke open in a way that no one in the king's chamber had foreseen. Neve was in the king's private library, the one with the long oak table and the maps of the Reach pinned to the walls, sorting the 84 tokens of Asmund's march into chronological order by the etching style of their runes. Torvald sat across from her with a cup of black tea he was not drinking. Kaidman stood at the door. The torches had been replaced once already.
The earliest of these is 14 years old,
Neve said.
the latest is from last winter.
And before 14 years?
Before 14 years, my king, the tokens carry a different mark, an older one. They are not for Asmund.
Torvald set his cup down. Whose? Neve did not answer immediately.
My king, the mark on the older tokens is a healer's mark. It is the mark my mother used to seal her innocence.
Silence. Neve, my king, you were telling me that your mother, the healer who died the night my Luna died, sealed iron tokens for the first 6 years of my curse.
Yes, my king. I am telling you that.
Why? Her hands were very still at the table.
Because the tokens were not always weapons. They were the binding stones of the original oath. The one your Vita and your generals put on you the night your Luna died. There were 9 of them.
Original. One for each man who stood in the room when the iron crown was set on your head. My mother sealed them. She was the only healer in the fortress that night. She had no choice. She sealed them with what?
With her own blood, my king.
The binding of honor. She did not know what she was sealing. She thought she was witnessing the king's mourning vow. She did not know it was a curse. And when did she learn? 6 years later, my king, when the original 9 tokens began to multiply. When she realized that whoever held a token could forge more, and that the strength being bled from you was being distributed. She came to tell you. She did not make it to your chamber. Who killed her?
My king, I have told you who killed her.
Asmund.
Asmund and one other. The other is still in this fortress.
Neve.
My king.
Who? She drew breath.
My king, the original 9 tokens.
The binding stones. My mother sealed them with her blood. Which means the door to the library opened. It was not Kaidman who opened it. It was opened from outside, by force. And the man who came through it carried a curved blade and wore the colors of the House of Power. And the man behind him carried a torch. The man behind that one was Lady Vesna, dressed for travel.
My king,
Vesna said. Her voice was very even.
I am taking the king's daughter. I am taking her quietly, with your blessing.
Because if you refuse me, the 83 remaining tokens in my faction's possession will pull the last decade of strength from your body in this room. You will die at this table tonight. Neve did not move. Torvald did not move. Kaidman was already moving. The man with the curved blade was very fast. Kaidman was faster, but there were 5 guards behind Vesna in the corridor, and they were all wearing iron tokens. Torvald rose from the table. He felt his strength go out of him as he stood. A wave, like blood loss, the floor tilting, his vision graying at the edges. He understood, in that moment, what 20 years of slow theft felt like when it accelerated. He fell to one knee. Neve was on her feet. She said to Vesna, "Take me and go. I will not fight you." "Neve," Torvald managed. "My king, stay alive. I will find you." Vesna smiled. "Find her," she said to her guards. They bound her with iron. They took her down the corridor and through the western gate and into a carriage that had been waiting for 3 hours. Torvald, on his knees on the library floor, watched the door close. Cadman was bleeding from a gash in his side. He pulled himself to his king. "My king, we will follow." "We will not catch them tonight." "My king, Cadman, I have just lost the only person in this fortress who knew how to unmake this curse. I have lost her because I made her stand in a room with iron tokens in the corridor outside. I will not lose her further by chasing without a plan. Bring me Marin. Bring me Garrick. Bring me every loyal sword in this fortress. We will move at dawn. We will move properly." Cadman went. Torvald sat on the floor of his library with his hands flat against the cold stone and felt, for the first time in 20 years, his own strength reach for itself and find a fraction more there than he had remembered. The tokens that had bled him were leaving the fortress. As they passed beyond the gates, their hold on him loosened by inches. He understood then what Neve had been trying to tell him before Vesna came through the door. Her blood had sealed the original 9 binding stones. Her mother's blood, which meant her blood, Neve's blood, the daughter's blood, could break them. Which was why Vesna was taking her alive. Which was why he had 3 days at most before someone bled the healer's daughter dry to remake the binding for the next 20 years. He stood. The world stayed steady. He walked to his armory. The eastern wood was 3 days' ride at hard pace, and Torvald rode it in 2. He did not ride alone. Kaidman was at his right hand. Marin, the young general who had knelt, rode at his left. Garrick had stayed at the fortress with 200 wolves to hold it against any faction loyal to Asmund who might think the king's absence was an opportunity. The court had been told the king was hunting. They had been told this in the formal voice. It was technically true. The carriage tracks went east, then south, then east again. The faction's stronghold, Neve, the 7 hours she had spent with the king the night the chains came off, had mapped for him on the back of an old hunting chart every place she had ever heard her mother's killers mention. Was a fortified hunting lodge in the foothills, owned on paper by a cousin of Vesna's, used in practice by the noble cabal that had been profiting from his oaths for 2 decades. By the second night, they were within sight of it. By the third night, they were inside the perimeter. Neve was in the lower chamber. She had been there for 2 days. She had been bled twice, a small ceremonial, the binding ritual being done slowly so as not to weaken her past the point of usefulness. Her wrists were wrapped again, in the same way they had been wrapped the night she walked into Torvald's hall. The wrappings were a kindness from one of the older men, who had known her mother and had not been able to bring himself to be cruel about the cuts. She had not eaten in 2 days. She had not slept. She had been listening. She had heard, through 3 walls, the names of every man in this lodge. She had heard the schedule of the binding. She had heard twice the voice of Lady Vesna, and once the voice of a man who must have been the senior figure of the cabal, old, dry, amused. He had called Asmund the loud one. He had called Torvald the inconvenience. He had said of Neve, she will be a more reliable seal than her mother. The mother kept a daughter. The daughter has no one. Neve had smiled, alone in the dark, because the daughter had someone now, and the cabal had not yet learned to think about her. On the 3rd night, she heard the lodge change. It was a small change, a door that did not close all the way, a guard who did not call the watch. The lodge was the kind of building where small changes were the only kind of warning anyone would get. She stood up. She wrapped her own ankles in the strips of linen she had been tearing from the underskirt of her shift for the last 2 days. She made herself ready. The door to her chamber opened. The man in the doorway carried a torch. He was not one of the cabal's men. "Neve," Torvald said. The torch shook in his hand. She crossed the room to him, and she did not run. She walked. She walked the way she had walked across his throne room 3 nights ago, with her head up and her chin steady. And when she stopped 1 pace from him, she did not lift her hands. "My king," she said. He set the torch in the bracket on the wall. He did not touch her. He looked at her wrists. He looked at her face. "You came," she said. "I told you I would. You told me you would move properly." "I have." "My king, the binding will be unmade tonight. Kaidman has the tokens we took on the way in. Marin has the senior figure of the cabal disarmed in the upper hall. Vesna is in a closet in her own kitchen, which is, I'm told, dignified for her circumstances. The lodge is ours." She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were not steady. "Neve." "My king." "You have not slept in 3 days." "No, my king." "Will you let me carry you out of this place?" Pause. "Yes," she said, "but not tonight. Tonight I will walk." She walked. She walked the corridor and the stairs and the long stone passage and the courtyard, and she walked through the gate of the lodge with her kings 2 paces behind her. And when she reached the horses, she stopped, and she said, "Now you may carry me." He did. The Iron Crown was set on the head of the new Luna of the Iron Reach 3 weeks after the cabal was tried publicly in the King's Hall. The trial had taken 9 days. 131 iron tokens had been entered as evidence. 17 members of the cabal had been named, including 4 lords of the Iron Reach, 2 foreign envoys, 1 senior healer who had served the previous beta, and General Asmund, whose confession, given on the 2nd day, when he understood that he was being tried not by Torvald alone, but by the full council, including 2 generals who had knelt and 3 who had been replaced, had filled in every gap that Neve's evidence had left. The cabal had been profiting for 20 years. The original 9 binding stones had been a noble experiment in controlling a too strong king. The token forging, bleeding off the king's strength into iron discs that could be carried, sold, traded, had been Asmund's innovation in year 6. The murder of the previous Luna had been the cabal's first act, executed to install the curse and clear the way to the binding. The murder of Neve's mother had been the cabal's second act, executed because the healer had learned what she had sealed and had been on her way to confess to the king. Neve had spoken on the 7th day. She had spoken for 2 hours. She had not wept. When she finished, the hall had been silent for the length of a slow breath, and then Kaidman, who had served 3 beaters now, including this king's first, had stepped forward and said into the silence, "My lords, my king, the healer ruler's daughter has carried this for 9 years alone. I move that the court rises. The court had risen. It had stayed standing while Neve walked the length of the hall, the same length she had walked in chains, and stopped before the iron throne where Torvald was waiting for her with his hand outstretched. She had taken his hand. She had not let go. The coronation was at the new moon. The hall was full. The pack had come from every corner of the reach, and the outer villages had sent representatives, and the eastern wood had sent its silent old wolves who never came to court for anything less than war or weddings. The fire pit had been lit at dusk. The carved wolf throne had been draped in furs. The iron crown, the king's crown, the one that had been warm against his hands the night Neve first walked into his hall, sat on a cushion of dark velvet beside a second crown, smaller, fitted in the same iron that had been forged in the past 2 weeks by the smith who had wept while he worked. Torvald stood before the court, and he spoke her name. Neve of the Hollow Reach, daughter of Alis the Healer, blood of the binding and breaker of it. Will you wear this crown?
My king?
Will you wear this crown?
I will.
He set it on her head. The iron, which had burned every wearer for 20 years, the king himself accepted by the original binding, did not burn her. The hall saw it. The hall had held its breath. Torvald leaned down. He did not press his face to hers. He did not pull her against him. He took her hand, the one she had given him 3 weeks ago at the trial and had not since taken back, and he raised it so the court could see the ring of dark iron on her smallest finger and the matching one on his. My Luna, he said. The kiss, when it came, was brief. The audience saw that he closed his eyes a fraction before her mouth reached his, that he was the one who flinched first into it, like a man stepping into warm water after a winter of cold. They saw her hand come up to his jaw and stay there. They saw him exhale once, long, as if a thing he had been holding for 20 years had finally been allowed to go. Then he straightened. Then he turned. Then he faced the court that had watched her walk in chains 3 weeks ago, and he said, in the high tongue, in the formal voice, in the words of a man who had spent 20 years sworn to oaths he had not chosen, I swear no oath on this crown. I will not bind this kingdom by my word for a generation. We have had enough of binding. Let us see what we are when we are free. The hall did not cheer. The hall stood for a long moment in silence. Then the oldest wolf in the eastern wood, a woman with white at her muzzle, 90 years in her eyes, stepped forward, alone, and bowed to the new Luna. Then the rest of them followed. 3 months later, the gardens of the Iron Reach were beginning to recover. They had been dead for 20 years. The Cabal's binding had taken not only the king's strength, but in some way no one had fully understood until Neve and the senior healers worked it out together over the autumn, the kingdom's growing season. The frost had come earlier each year. The harvests had thinned. The eastern wood had lost 3 named springs to drought. In the first month after the trial, the eastern wood's oldest spring had run again. In the second month, the southern orchard had budded for the first time since the late king's reign. In the third month, on a morning when Torvald and Neve were walking the gardens together at the dawn watch, a single iron rose, a symbol of the old Iron Reach, a flower that grew nowhere else, extinct from the gardens for 21 years, opened beside the path. Neve stopped. Torvald stopped. She knelt by the flower. He knelt beside her. She did not pick it. "It is the first one," she said. "Yes." "There will be others." "Yes." She looked at him. He was not the man she had met on the Iron Throne 3 months ago. He was lighter at the cheekbones in a way that had nothing to do with weight. The shadow under his eyes had been gone for 6 weeks now, and he had slept, the night before, for 9 straight hours, which was the longest unbroken sleep he had taken since he was 22 years old.
My king,
She said, "My Luna."
there is a letter.
She drew it from her sleeve. It was sealed in green wax. It had arrived the previous night by rider from the Hollow Reach.
Lord Brennan?
He asked. Yes.
What does he say?
He apologizes. A pause.
At length?
At considerable length, my king.
Will you write back?
No.
Will you let me?
My king, you will start a war.
I will start a brief one.
She laughed. It was the first time he had heard her laugh. A real laugh. Low and warm, with her head tipped slightly back, and he made a small sound, almost involuntary, like a man who had been waiting to hear a particular note of music and had finally heard it. She folded the letter back into her sleeve. She stood. He stood. They walked on, 2 paces apart, through the gardens of the kingdom they had unmade, and were now beginning to remake, past the iron road that would soon be joined by others, toward the great hall where Kaiden was waiting with the morning's council, and a council reformed by half, with 3 new generals, 2 retired by request, one freshly promoted from a young captaincy in the eastern wood. The chains she had walked into his hall in were buried in the western crypts, in the same vault as the previous Luna, who had been quietly reinterred with full honors after the trial. The iron tokens had been melted down and reforged as 2 rings and 2 crowns, and nothing else. The story of the day the chained woman walked into the throne room, and the 3 hours that followed, was being told that winter in every village of the Iron Reach, and would be told for a long time after.